Welcome to Conscious Living here at the Specially Produce Network. We are so glad you're here to support your lifestyle with the fastest growing resource for conscious families. So sit back, relax, connect, and enjoy. Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here to join us today. I'm here live in the Specially Produce Network in San Diego, California, and I'm here live with our favorite amazing guests. We're going to talk about some, as my daughter, I'll say, when she was young, she said, "Are you having a Syrian conversation?" And I'm like, "Aww. We could." Or maybe we could make it fun. But we're going to talk about getting through hard times, right, gals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'd like to introduce Sophia Valenty.
Hello, good morning.
And Courtney Harter.
Hello.
Hello. So tell me, ladies, what's happening. What made you, inspired you, or create this podcast called Getting Through Harder Times?
So our website that we cooperate together is called happierdaily.com. It's all about getting happier daily. It's kind of self-explanatory, and that there's a possibility that everybody can be happier at some point in their life. If it's not today, it can be tomorrow or 10 years from now. It's a possibility that it can happen. So because that is such a broad topic, happiness, I decided, all right, I need to be decisive and narrow it down to something a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
So we're going to stick with this one thing today.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
And we were also thinking, like, what is, when people talk about happiness, what is the main thing they need help with? And so anger comes up a lot. Yeah. And also just in general, going through a hard time, that's when you're going to struggle with your happiness.
Right.
So, it's a barrier.
Yeah, we just figured today we'd love to share some quick tools with you and, make it a little bit more simple. So
right. Right. And hard times for people can be so many different things, right? It can be physical hard times, like, you're feeling pain and suffering in your body, or with other people and they're having pain and suffering in their body. Or it can be emotional, like, my feelings are out of whack. I don't know what to do. Things are happening. How do I get out of overwhelm? Right. And it can be mental. Oh my God, not again, right? And we get stuck in judgments and self-judgments.
And that's all the things that are still there when I try and narrow it down.
Right.
Narrow down the topic.
Right, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's a beautiful topic because it allows us really to evaluate what's happening, right, in our lives. So how do we recognize when we are having hard times? Because a lot of us do coping, right?
Oh.
So we cope and we go, oh, no, I'm not really having a hard time. It's over there in that chair. It's not really here in this chair, right?
That's a good point.
That's a great point. I actually brought up with Sophia that, I don't know, I would say very recently I just discovered there's certain things in my life that I didn't like, but I truly had no clue because I kind of was numbed to it in a way.
Right.
And so I feel like that totally fits in where it's like, I was making my life more complicated than it needed to be unknowingly.
Right.
And that's a discovery I've had where a lot of people, we actually love to complicate things.
Yeah.
And so we might be going through a time that isn't as hard as it seems.
Right.
So keeping it real simple is kind of hard. Like I've learned some very simple techniques and I always try, I call it to personalize it.
Yeah.
And I've been taught, stop doing that. There's like, for example, universal laws of nature. And if I try and change like the way that nature intends something to be, then I'm not going to get the result I'm trying to get. So just do the basic thing. Yeah. The tools that.
Exactly. Well, I was going to ask you too, like the idea of us complicating things. Why do we complicate things? What creates that?
Well, that's a good question. I wanted to bring up a story. It's not my original story, but it's really well ties into this, I think. And it's the story of the farmer and the horse. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's this I looked it up last night. I think it's like a Taoist tradition or story that they tell. But basically, the story is, or the moral is just asking the question, basically, who knows if this thing is good or bad? So the way the story goes is a farmer's horse runs away, and the neighbor comes over and he's like, "Oh, like I'm so sorry your horse ran away," or whatever. And the owner of the horse, the farmer, he's like, "Well, how do we know if that's good or bad?" A few days later, the horse comes back and it brings 12 other horses.
Wow.
And the neighbor's like, "Wow, congratulations on your good fortune." He's like, "I don't know if this is good or bad." He's just kind of like observing things and not taking an emotional stance on it right away.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the farmer's son, he goes and tries to tame one of the horses and it bucks him off. The neighbor comes back, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your son." Or the son broke his leg when that happened. He said, "I'm so sorry about your son's leg. That's so horrible." Again, how do we know if that's good or bad? The next day, the army or whoever comes and they're looking for their draft picks, and because his broken leg, he didn't get drafted. So who knows if
good or
all
bad.
those events leading up are good or bad.
Right.
I love that. Yeah.
Kind of makes you stop and think, okay, is what I'm going through really that bad? Or am I... There's another quote that actually I love, and it kind of reminds me of that. And it says, "Are you really having a bad day, or is it a bad 5 minutes that you milked all day?"
I love that one.
Yeah. Kind of.
Can you say that again?
Because
Because that's really awesome.
yeah, I totally felt called out when I read that, and the comment on it was, "I didn't need such a personal attack this morning," or whatever. But it was it a bad day, or was it a bad 5 minutes that you milked all day?
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that one.
Right.
Well, and going back to the idea, too, of why we complicate things, I really think that we are so busy trying to associate whether things are good or bad, and we're trying to label them. And from that labeling, we're looking for reasons. Like, we're looking for reasons on why one thing is good or one thing is bad.
Yep.
And that's what you just really so eloquently illustrated, both of you, about the idea that what if we take away that label or that reason and look a little bit deeper? Take a breath in and have some patience, because look at how the patience came a day later, and then the draft came, and, well, he had a broken leg.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe he has more choices than he knew he could have, right?
I just wanted to add something because it made me recall with the overcomplicating. Everybody has a polarity, so it's like a charge where you're either positively charged with the optimist, negatively with the, I forgot what that was. Pessimist, and then neutral. And so what that actually means is I used to think, oh, I'm, generally happy, so I must be positively charged. Turns out I'm neutral, which means that I can see the positive and negative of the situation. And then for me, I kind of just go with what makes more sense. So even if it's a negative, I'll go with that, and I'll be like, for example, that 5 minutes, okay, logically, I can't see all the pieces matching up, so it seems like a bad thing, and I'm going to treat it like a bad thing. And then with the pessimists, or at least the negatively charged people, they're going to look at a situation, and it's actually their brilliance to see first what isn't working. It's some people might think negatively charged must mean negative, bad, but no, it's just a different way of looking at it. And so we need both of them, because the positively charged people are going to be like running away with the possibility of everything good that
Right, so seeing
happen.
Possibilities and potentials.
Yeah, and so we need both people to tie us all down and
Anchor us in
Anchor.
Balance.
to this experience.
Yeah, and so I think the brain naturally kind of does that with our situations, and we might be going through a time that, yes, it's difficult. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be as hard as we might think it is. So, for example, if we can get rid of any things that are in our way, then that really difficult couple minutes can turn into, like, the next hour is not as painful.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
I kind of want to... Oh, sorry. I wanted to expand on what you're talking about with how, there's always two sides of it. You can look at it positively or negatively. And there's this idea, and it was in one of the Case Kenny podcasts, the whole what if thing. Basically, his point was that you kind of create stress when you think about things all the time. But say you have, I don't know, a job interview coming up or something, and you don't know how it's going to go, but you're stressing about it. What if it goes terribly? What if I have something in my teeth? Or what if you just create all this stress? But he challenges the audience to say, okay, well, what if this goes super well? What if I get a better position than I even applied for? What, just that kind of thing. I think it breeds like a good amount of positivity, but I kind of want to like reel in the conversation a little bit and talk about like real hard times, because people are going through that, and I don't think we should really ignore that. So when people are going through hard times, for example, like I was just going through Reddit, and I asked r/ask Reddit. I was like, okay, what do you guys do when you're going through the worst day of your life? How do you get through that? And there's some really like heart-wrenching things that people are going through.
Yeah.
And when I thought of this whole concept kind of in relation to that, what if it goes great? What if it goes great? I kind of think like that'll get your hopes up. And so that is a good technique to use when you're kind of stressing out and inventing all this bad stuff that could happen. But when real bad stuff is actually happening, that's a whole new story. So I forgot what I wanted to say about that.
It can be, right? It's the same kind of ideas though that you've been sharing with everyone. Like when we go through hard times, real hard times. Like I have a colleague who has an interesting story, and I'd love to share it. Her name is Sparky Bridges, and she has blue ribbons, and she gives them out to the world. She's given out 40 million. And in this process, she has a story of her own where she was in front of a mugger. And she didn't, I think the story goes, I may be changing it a little bit, so, but hearing it second hand. But part of the story is she asked the mugger, I think she didn't have any money with her or anything. And what happened was she had said, may I give you something? Because the mugger was asking for her money. And he said yes, and so she said, well, will you hold out your hands? And so he dropped the gun or the knife or whatever it was that he was threatening her with, and they held hands, and she said, may I give you something? And he said yes. So she pulled a blue ribbon out of her purse, and it has a little sticky on it, and she did this whole process, and the whole process was basically who you are matters. And she gave him a blue ribbon that says who you are matters, and who you are counts. Mm-hmm. And it completely shifted and changed his whole life. And I don't know whether he stopped deciding to burglarize people or not, or what was happening. But what had changed was that even in that hardship that she was faced with, she went to, like you were talking about, peace. She went to peace. She went to that inner part of herself, knowing that she's safe, she's okay. Mm-hmm. She didn't have money to give him anyway. I'm just kidding, or something like that, right? But it didn't matter, right? Because she was interested in ending the violence in herself and her experience, which supported ending the violence in him, because really where he was coming from was a place of fear, not having enough.
Wow.
Right?
That's beautiful.
So those are ways in which we can actually work with hard times, is going within, right? Mm-hmm. And finding that inner peace, and then expressing that outward.
Definitely.
Like you were saying, is what if we all can be happy even in the midst of chaos?
Yeah.
I think it's not easy. I think it takes some training. And some practice.
Yeah.
So start with the little ones, right? First.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had this experience where my dog is getting old, and he's been having a lot of trouble with his arthritis, and he has all kind of infections and all the things that come with old age and stuff. And there was a time a couple months ago we really thought we were going to lose him, and we had to take him to the vet. And so kind of the training that you're talking about, I think that my habitual procrastination has actually helped me with that, because I've somehow unlocked this ability to kind of like push my emotions, and push my emotions until some deadline. So in that experience, my mom was freaking out. We had to go to the vet. She didn't want to bring his 12-year-old body into the car and shake around in the car and everything. And then we didn't even know if he was going to say, oh, he has cancer or whatever. Just so many variables and possibilities that could happen. So one technique that kind of helped me stay sane in that moment was that I kind of blocked it out until I really had a moment to process it and deal with it in a safe time. Like I like to always make sure I get somewhere safe. So in the car, I was like, okay, I just got to focus on driving right now. I can worry about my dog, but all of the reality of, I'm going to find out what's going on with him, that's all in the future. But right now, I got cars around me. And so,
Right.
I don't know, that's just how I have dealt with some stuff. I'm nicknaming that little technique the procrastinator's advantage.
I actually, what she's describing, it's called putting a container around something.
Right.
So if something is really stressing you, or you're just completely overwhelmed, can't think, figure out what it is. So it's like, okay, she'll think about this. We're going to think about that tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then you're going to revisit it at 1 p.m. tomorrow, just so that you're, staying true to that. And then I notice for me, that calms me way down when I'm going through a difficult time, because it's like, I am going to get to this. It's just, I put a deadline on it, and now it's literally in its own container that I will revisit later on.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's very healthy, though, to, like, push it too far. Like, having that deadline, whether it's just when I get to the vet or at 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Exactly.
It makes you revisit it. And I think that's extremely, extremely important, because you are bearing down that emotion for a certain amount of time, but it's got to come out at some time.
And what if there's a difference between bearing it down and putting it aside or putting it in a container, right? So that you're doing it volitionally, like you're moving that intention into action.
Yes.
Right? And so what if there is that soft, subtle distinction or discernment between the two? Am I coping and I'm kind of pushing it away because I don't really want to deal with it?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I truthfully really acknowledging it and saying, it's here, I know I need to deal with it, but I actually need to deal with these other things first.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll prioritize and deal with these other things first, and then I'll come back to that. I promise. And I don't know, let's say you get busy and everything, moves out of control, and you say, by the end of I promised myself I'd get back to it, and I ran out of time. So do I have time now, or will I handle it tomorrow? And it's not really, so that idea of procrastination, right, has a little bit of self-judgment in it. So we can gain access to that, right, and go, oh, look at that, I'm judging myself. But I'm really not trying to procrastinate. It really is, that's just a lesser of a priority, right? Even though it's a priority, it's a lesser of a priority than what's happening in this moment. Yeah. And I have the right to choose that. And that's what's really cool, right? Because we call that conscious choice.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing tool.
Very.
And we can't get to that, though, if we're all muddled up in our feelings or our hard times and our overwhelm, right? So what did you do, like when you were driving the dog to the vet, right? You concentrated and focused on what you needed to do to get safely there to provide care for him as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So you did exactly what you just described, Courtney. Yeah. That was awesome.
And I love what you brought up, because it's true. I've had that where now that I understand this container concept, I am more aware, and all you need is awareness for things to easily shift. So now when things come up where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this tonight at 9 p.m. And then I check in with myself, like, are you doing that to avoid this, because it'll carry a heavy energy that kind of makes me feel sick if I am pushing it off in that way. Yeah. So for me, I'm sure there's different types of people, but I have to take action to get rid of that energy and to just keep things moving. And sometimes the action is putting it in my container of, I'm visiting this at 5 p.m. tonight, took an action, got rid of that energy.
Way to look at that.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
empowering.
Right. Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yep. And so if someone's going through a horrible time, on Reddit, they were sharing, just awful things they're going through. You can, sometimes your emotions, they aren't going to make sense. And you can even be like, you know what? I'm going to walk this off right now and I will revisit, these emotions like when I get back. Let's just go for a walk and let it move out. And yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times. And what if we're super smart? Like, what if we can remember the emotion we had, but we don't have to keep it present or prevalent in our body?
Exactly. I just learned that you actually can tithe your thoughts back into the world. So I have like a processing brain that I get tons of creative ideas all the time, and I want to do all of them. And then I don't get many of them done just because I'm developing way too many things out. And so
I suffer from that.
Yes. And so now I've learned, it's a great idea, but let's tithe that back into the world because pretty much someone's going to do that idea. I don't know that I can do it myself right now, but if it is something I'm meant to do, it's going to come back to me in another way. So, yeah.
Exactly.
And so do that even with your negative thoughts and feelings. You can just be like, you know what, right now it's like, thank you. I'm going to send that back out and
let that go for a little while.
Do you kind of visualize it like going somewhere?
Yeah, there's different techniques, but for me, I actually have just been something that really works is saying thank you 3 times because it's sort of like cutting it out where it's just like, I acknowledge you, like I heard you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that idea and that thought. I'm going to, send it back out because I'm sure someone's going to like take that idea and run with it. Or if we're talking about you're going through like a horrible experience and you have just awful feelings, just sending it out, it's a form of support. So it's just like, you don't necessarily have to have an idea or like be spiritual or turn this into a God thing. You can just be like, I'm going to have nature hold on to this for me, just send it back out.
Taking the weight off your own shoulders and just, I'm going to put this down real quick.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is either when we take on all that energy, we're going to start spewing it negatively to others, or we're going to like, what's the word? We just like absorb it into our body, and now we have this awful, sickening weight we're carrying with us, and then we're not gonna be able to think as well, process as well. It just really is gonna affect us. So the best thing to do when you do not know what to do, get up, go take a walk. Just crossing your arms crosses the brain hemispheres, and you need to focus on breathing because that's the body's natural way of it's a filter to
moving
move
energy
things out. So a lot of people, like for me especially, I hold my breath and I never thought breathing was important. I never like thought about it really, but I've learned when you're going through something difficult, the breath is the most important thing to do. It's worth your time to take 2 to 3 minutes just to breathe. And I also bring that up because when people are going through tough times, they will often choose meditation. The issue with that, or the opportunity they have with that, is they're sometimes going to bring up more emotions that are difficult to deal with, more anger when they're already trying to get past this first hurdle. And that's because their energetics aren't cleaned up. And so by taking that walk, crossing those arms, and focusing on the breath, that is helping your energetics to do what they need to do to clear out.
Right.
And in a way, like that is a meditation. It's better to do that form of meditation, just listening to the breath. It kind of sounds like the sound of the ocean going in and out.
Right.
So
there are many forms of meditation.
Yeah.
We're working on that in the children's meditation program, and we're talking about for kids and parents and adults, everyone, that meditation is a form of connecting to your inner guidance.
Yes.
And so what if your inner guidance for a moment has a lot of anger?
Yeah.
Right? It could, right? It's your emotional inner guidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your inner guidance in that area of your emotional body or your mental body is you're overwhelmed, you're confused with thoughts, and you have a lot of anger or disrupt or discord. And walking is actually a great form of meditation or breathing and any physical exercise because it helps you get grounded in your body, it helps you relieve those emotions, right? And then you have more clarity of what were the triggers that were creating those emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's essentially you're just trying to clear out whatever interference has come up,
Yeah.
and we don't need to catastrophize it. We understand when you're going through a hard time, there's definitely hard things that happen. Usually those take place within a couple seconds, and then we're holding on to the energy of it, the burden of it. So we need to take responsibility so that we can feel better, and that we're, it helps the people around us, because if we're carrying this, they can feel it. So,
You're so correct, because like when you said too about thank you, thank you, thank you, what's really neat is thank you really supports our brain and nervous system in feeling that our needs got met.
Exactly.
And so when our needs got met, we're like, we can relax, right? We can take a breath. We can take a better look of what's and the scope of the problem or the scope of the issue that we're feeling hard times with, right?
I love that. I just have to add real quick,
a good point.
because I had an experience with that where I was trying to clear out kind of like a PTSD energy I had. Didn't make sense, was definitely getting in the way, and it just wouldn't leave. And I was like, what's going on? And I kind of had this, like, I got quiet with myself, and it became clear that this, whatever it was, wanted acknowledgement, that it had protected me. So logically, that doesn't make sense. It didn't protect me. It kind of put me it made a difficult situation more hard by carrying this, but it was there trying to protect me, like emotionally and all these things. So I just had to be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's like, I'm good now. You can go. And then it just cleared out immediately.
Exactly. You let go of that coping for protection so that you could have an opportunity to see the deeper truth or to see what the triggers or beliefs are around that happening.
Exactly.
Good stuff.
It sure is.
I have
amazing.
one more tool I would love to share with people.
Please, let's hear it.
So I have learned, not sure if anyone else out there is like me, but when I feel very frustrated, I start to get tense, and I think I start to yell, and I can't really hear myself doing it. It's just I'm so frustrated. And I've learned I just cover my solar plexus with my hand, and it's actually in your stomach area. That's like where you hold on to a lot of your emotions, and I don't yell. I can stay calm, even though if I feel like exploding on the inside, I'm able to just stay because I'm somehow supporting some sort of, I don't know. Our body does have like a energy system as part of its anatomy, and I'm doing something to help it. So
yes, absolutely.
I would just recommend whenever you're going through anything difficult, just put your hand over your stomach and just see how, like, what happens. Just because everyone will have like a different experience of it, but it just helps me stay grounded, connected, and anchored, and helps me to breathe. So it's cool.
I think it's a beautiful idea.
Yes.
It really, really is. And sometimes we can even take it. I talk about like meditation, that idea of connecting to our inner guidance, wherever that inner guidance would like to lead us. But we could have like a 1 second blink. And in that 1 second, we can expand time and have that access to understanding what's happening, to have clarity. But you're right, it is really hard to have clarity when our emotions feel overrun in our bodies.
Yes.
So those are beautiful techniques. Breathing, walking, holding our stomach.
Yes. And then the other thing is, while you're walking, you can just go like this. And it kind of looks weird. It doesn't have to be so exaggerated.
It's kind of brushing your energy.
You're just going like this. And what you're kind of doing is cutting it out. So cut it out. So whatever attachments you have, you're actually physically cutting it out. And you'll kind of, sometimes I don't feel it, but I still do it. For the most part, when I don't know, certain ones you'll definitely feel a shift. It's like you start to relax and you feel relief. Right. So I would say that's great, when you're walking and crossing the hands, cutting it out. And you can even do that like if someone says something that you don't like, just be like that. And people don't always notice or say anything, which is.
And you're not always cutting it out to get away from it. You're cutting it out so that you don't feel so attached to it in the moment that it burdens you down or takes you down, so that you have an opportunity to look at it free in your body, open in your body, and ready to work with what could be those triggers that were causing that
Yes.
overwhelm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And it leaves anything that's benefiting you. So that's good to remember that when you cut something out, you get to keep everything that benefited you. And that's also something that we should bring up with when you're going through a hard time, you're going to hold on to some pieces of it. Like maybe you are holding on to feelings about it because you recognize that this hard time benefited you in some way.
Right.
So you need to look at that and ask yourself, okay, well, I went through this and like, what am I getting out of this? What did I get out of this? And then once you understand that, you can be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm good now. You can go, and I'm going to keep these benefits, but I'm going to, release the stuff that's not working for me now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy balance between kind of approaching things and looking at things like an observer, but also having like self-reflection too.
Absolutely.
But I like what you said there, like releasing the things that the emotions and stuff that aren't serving you anymore, helping you in your day, and holding on to those kind of advantages or opportunities that the hard time created. I do want to add a last thing too, is that I know that when people are actively going through hard times, they don't know how to deal with it. And that alone kind of adds additional stress to them. It's like, well, I just don't know what to do with myself. And I just found out blah, blah, blah has cancer. And that creates just an additional conflict. But I just want to respond to that and say, who really does know how to respond to that stuff? Like, there's an extent that all these tricks and stuff will work, but you're still going to carry some emotional or, like, it's just, stuff is hard. So if you are feeling like you just don't know what to do with yourself, imagine if you just got over it super quickly and you're like, oh, that's fine. Sounds a little psychopathic a little bit.
Well, so what we're doing is talking about, right, whether we're covering it up and pushing it away, or whether we're actually giving it a break and a moment to breathe and a moment to relieve ourselves of our emotions and our overwhelming state, to actually come into that and understand the elements of the hard times and eliciting support and resources, right? So we can have the support of others. We can have the opportunity to take a break. We can take the day off from work, or school, or whatever it is we're experiencing, to really come into that moment of really understanding the dynamics of what was creating that hard time, to be able to move through it. I want to thank you both for coming and joining us today. It was such a beautiful day to explore this topic and to really give that guidance and love and compassion and support for even when we're having difficult times. And so I want to illustrate to everyone to really go to happierdaily.com to experience a daily affirmation and a daily opportunity to seek on how to really move through difficult times to having that innate happiness inside you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Good talking with you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Thank you all for listening to this podcast. We are so grateful for you tuning in and experiencing the innovations and opportunities we all can incorporate into our daily lives. Connect with us at centerforconsciouskids.com to sign up for the latest news that showcases these revolutionary services and products. Our global website provides families with an online conduit for enrichment and transformation in all our lives. Please share with other kids and families who would enjoy these advancements in living consciously. I'm Ashley Lee, and I thank you so much for joining us.